How to embellish a room divider.
Good afternoon. If anybody's watching me today, I want to show you something really special. This has actually been a dream of mine for more than 10 years. I bought this room divider with the dream of decorating the panels with knitting and crochet. And I have had this divider sitting in a corner or sitting as a backdrop or even sitting in a closet untouched all these years until today. And I am making a special crafting dream come true because I have taken not only every yarn that I make, but every fabric that I have designed and make and sell. And I'm creating an entire collage based off of all of my products. And it's going to go in my studio and be a backdrop for some videos, but also for something I can look at every single day and enjoy this collage of all the things that I make and sell. So I'm really excited about it. And I've taken one print of all 11 prints of my Day of the Dragonfly fabric collection and either did them in the center panels or in the side panels. And then I took Be So Fine yarn, fingering weight bamboo, Be So Sporty yarn, sport weight bamboo, Be So Wild yarn, worsted weight bamboo, Be So Brave, worsted weight American merino wool, and Be So Wild, the yarn that I make one of a kind out of sequins and all sorts of novelty fun. And I created a different stitch pattern for all of these panels and used each color once. So obviously there's a lot of panels in here, but that's what I've been working on all day. And so now for the tutorial, I thought you could watch along as I glue them down with fabric glue. If you have any questions about any of these products or any of the techniques that I've used today, please feel welcome to ask questions, whether it's live or in playback, because I will be able to answer your questions either live in real time or in notifications. So I'm going to get started. A lot of the stitch patterns I actually used based on projects that I have done over the years for my books and or for my free pattern downloads on my website. And when I get to some of them, I will point them out. For example, this one here is Be So Brave yarn in Lincoln Lime colorway. And when you see the photo of the finished project, you'll see a better close-up. This stitch pattern I used in Crochet So Lovely book. And it's actually a funny story because I designed a pair of thigh-high lace-up leg warmers that got cut from the book for being too lacy or racy, and we ended up making gauntlets in this stitch pattern to use instead, and they're super cute. In the book they use one of Drew & Borsky's yarns, and it's really unusual because it strips like this, but I also combined this stitch pattern with Bruges lace to make them strips that you join as you go. So this panel here will always remind me of those Too Sexy for Crochet Publishing lace-up leg warmers. You know, I had to have crochet motifs in here, right? So there's tons of those. These little 1-inch square pieces, I just did a simple double crochet. One round square, did them in, I think all yarns are represented in those squares as well. I'm using fabric glue and a little sponge brush for getting an even distribution of the glue before I press it in. Did a lot of measuring first before doing any of these pieces. It's amazing. Sometimes, I can't believe how often it happens that you measure a couple times, cut, still needed to measure again. I don't know why that is. I think it has to do with distractions, I guess. I think we just live in a world where we get distracted all day long, and it doesn't matter how many times I measure something before cutting, I invariably still make mistakes. Maybe you do too, maybe you don't, I don't know. I make a lot of mistakes when cutting. One thing that seems awfully naughty, but I'm doing for this project, is not weaving in my ends. I am cutting my yarn. I mean, the ends on the inside have already kind of woven in because they're in the round. But the ones on the end here, I'm cutting them about 1 inch long. This one's a little too long. And kind of enjoying the naughtiness of it and turning it over and pressing it into the glue with the motif. So any purists out there, you don't have to do it that way. If you're going to make one of these, you could definitely weave in your ends first. I'm trying to make this a one-day project. As crazy and outrageous as that sounds, one of the ways I'm able to do that is by skipping the weaving in. I'm also ironing my bigger pieces before gluing them in as well. These little ones I don't have an issue with, but any of the bigger ones I've been ironing and steaming them first. Definitely the fabric, but also the yarn pieces that are bigger. Let's see, this is still ready to go? Nope. Okay, I think we'll do 2 at a time here to get the ball rolling. And thanks to the nature of knitting and crochet, you know, when you pull one way, you shorten the other way and vice versa. So it'll make it nice for trying to wedge these into the places. They're approximately the right size already, but being able to manipulate the fabric as I'm putting it in the glue will really help to get it nice and even in these panels. Just kind of eyeball how much glue I need in there and smooth it out. With the sponge brush. This particular glue does dry clear, so if I do have any excess, it won't be a gigantic eyesore, but really trying to be neat and tidy about it. This would be a great project for using your stash, whether it's stash of fabric, stash of yarn, or the leftovers of a special project so that you can have the memories of everything that went into it. Speaking of which, I've had friends that do that with t-shirts, making quilts out of t-shirts from different sport tournaments or different vacation spots. You could do that sort of thing here too, to make this a memory keepsake. See how with the crochet piece I started at the ends to make sure I had those in place and then adjusted the width and the length to get it to kind of ease in by just working from midpoints after that. Got the corners in place first and then just kind of used a little bit of that wiggle room to get it just right. The glue is quite tacky, so it's been very helpful in getting pieces in place. Okay, we're ready for a fabric strip. Want to get it right up to the edges if possible, nice and smooth. The problem with the glue under the fabric is that if you have an excess in any one spot, you'll end up making the fabric pucker, and that won't look pretty either. So try to get it as even as you can, and the sponge brushes have been very helpful, in my opinion, for doing that. You could use a chopstick, a pen with a cap on it, the end of a crochet hook or knitting needle to try to get your corners nice and tight. I can already tell there's not too much glue in there. I don't feel any puckering underneath. It's a good feeling. Now, if at this point you found that you had a little bit too much gap here and a little too much excess fabric here, it's not so tacky that you can't pick it up and reapply. On the fabric pieces, sometimes I think it's easier to really just start on an end, get it all buttoned up nice and tight, and then smooth it down. Okay, ready for a big fabric piece now. This is where I think it's probably the most important just to iron, and also the most important for getting your glue really evenly distributed. I did not hem my fabrics, but I also have them perfectly butted up inside these frames. The frames are inset. I've got about 1/4 of an inch of the framework, so I felt like I didn't need to, but if you wanted to, you could either do a folded over pressed seam, or you could actually even sew a seam. Gosh, you could do patchwork in these squares. Instead of doing one fabric, you could do some sort of sewn patchwork in there, which would, you know, tie in more of a quilting theme. That would be really pretty too. I'm picking up the mistakes with my fingers and just reapplying it where I can. I feel like I could use a little more glue in the middle. Once I open the cap. Okay, we've got a really nice, very thin and relatively smooth layer of glue all the way to the edges. I am ready to set in my fabric. I'm going to start. I think the hardest part of this is just the size of the whole project. It's not easy to reach. I don't know how in the world I'm going to reach the centerpiece. I might actually have to do that one with the whole divider more standing up or leaning over. Okay. See those puckers? It's because I don't have it evenly placed in there. I might have to redo it. This one might have been one for starting in the center. There we go. And and don't rush yourself on fussing with at this point, because once it's glued down, if there's puckers or blemishes or imperfections, you know, it's too late then. Without having to start all over. I could pick up this side one more time. Because of my raw edges, I do have some fraying, but I can take care of that right away. You could certainly make this in a random pattern as well, or have some method behind the madness, which is what I did. I alternated fabric and crochet. I did all the center panels in fabric, but then in the side panels alternated which window frame, so to speak, within the panels had fabric and crochet. And then I decided to make these little squares all crochet, oh actually in knitting, and then kept these white for the balance so it didn't get too terribly busy. And so I tried to make more of a pattern than a randomness, but it's up to you. It's, if you make one, you can make it the way you see. I think I see. Oh, hello, Dracy, I think your name is. I'm so glad you could join me today. Thank you very much. Ah, that one's not done. Okay, so we're going to go with the crochet one next. This one is a combination of granny squares and little flowers. I'm going to give it a quick pressing first. This one is a combination of Be So Sporty and Be So Fine yarn. So the larger squares are in the sport weight, the smaller flowers are in the fingering weight, but all in the same hand-dyed colorway, Caribbean turquoise. Looks super cute together. Anyway, let's get the glue going. So you can see how we do one of these panels. This one we don't need to have glue in the same way as the other ones because we're not putting 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So what I want to do first is get a spot of glue where the squares are going. And then if I need to put a dollop underneath the flowers, I can. But I don't need glue all over the rice paper because there isn't going to be something. There's negative space in this particular piece. But they are square, so they go right to the corner edges. So, okay, so what I'm going to do is try placing the squares first. Okay, so I've got all the squares now into position. And I'm going to go back and put a little dollop of glue underneath the flowers so that they don't fall off. Or not fall off, but once this is standing up, I don't want them to droop forward. So we'll put a little dollop of glue underneath each of them. Hold them in place. And maybe hide a tail. think this might be my favorite panel. And maybe just because it, it's different but the same. You've got the same color of the hand-dyed yarn, but you've got different stitch patterns, different weights of yarn, so it's like they match and don't match at the same time. I had the squares done and then went to design the flowers based on the space between the squares as they would fit in this panel. Took 4 attempts to get the right flower panel. Not just the right flower, had to get the right size flower and had to figure out where along the granny square it was going to join properly to get the right effect. I wanted them to be more like an X like that, and at first they weren't because I was trying to join them in the chain 1 space on either side or anywhere in the 3 double crochet section, so it wasn't until I did the 4th attempt that I got these beautiful flowers with picots. Oh, that was the other thing. I needed a picot at the tips of each of the flower petals to bring the flower petal to a join, and the joining of the motifs wasn't taking away from the flower petal. And in order to do that, it had to be a separate picot so that it didn't compromise the shape of the flower. For anybody interested in doing that sort of thing on your own. Well, I am approaching 1/3 of the way done with assembly. I've got probably a few more hours left of this. And if you have any questions about any of the products that I've used here today, any of the stitch patterns, I will have a lot more information about this after it's done. I appreciate all of your viewing time, all of your questions, and I will have way more information about this in the very near future. In the meantime, I'm going to get back to work here. Have a great Friday. Bye!
Please subscribe to my channel for more videos.